Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories like these. Now, let's get into today's story video.
Revenge is a dish best served soiled. This is the tale of how I discovered my girlfriend of over 3 years was cheating on me and how I got my vengeance. This occurred almost a year ago, so it's wonderful to have it all written down. I've been thinking about it for a long. It certainly feels relieving, and I've tried to make it as interesting as possible. Thanks for reading in advance. I guess I should begin by telling you how I met my girlfriend and how she grew to mean so much to me. In the summer of 2016, I met Sarah during a yoga session. I never saw myself going to anything like that. The stupid spandex, the holier-than-thou attitude, the way everyone spoke to one another like they were high. It's not something I ever saw myself doing, but after injuring my back after falling from a first-floor roof at work, I decided to give it a try on the advice of my back masseuse and located a hall in my city that offered introductory yoga lessons. When the time came to go and I stepped through the door, I stood out like a sore thumb. Everyone was dressed to the nines in their finest yoga attire, while I wandered in wearing bog-normal shorts and t-shirt, looking like someone from a cowboy movie strolling into a sci-fi movie set. Of course, I wanted to turn around and go, but the lady teaching the class saw my terrified expression and walked up to me and said hello. I explained why I was there and that I didn't feel very comfortable, but she suggested that I give it a go since she felt it would help my back issues, and if it didn't, well, no harm, no foul. At that time, I felt better and decided, screw it, I may as well attempt to get my money's worth, even if it meant looking like a sick pretzel. When I glanced across the room, I saw the identical face of dread that I had undoubtedly been portraying. That was Sarah. She'd just recently discovered she had scoliosis, after years of being misdiagnosed and told, among other things, that it was all in her brain. She was there with her mother, who was there to provide emotional support and to monitor her progress. I was drawn to her in the same manner that a drowning person is drawn to a life ring thrown to them after seeing her. After the yoga teacher spoke with her, she called me over and suggested that it was Sarah's first time as well, so maybe we can sit next to each other and provide each other some support. I told her it was okay with me, and she smiled and nodded, so I went over. We hit it off immediately away, and my feelings shifted from humiliation to serious enjoyment as we both tried to blend in with the rest of the class. We were still chatting after the lesson ended, and I felt a true connection and butterflies in my stomach, and as we said our goodbyes, we met one another's eyes, and she smiled at me with a purity that left me weak at the knees for the first time in my life. I wouldn't have gone back if I hadn't met her, but I decided to attend the following week, and as I walked in, I had those butterflies in my stomach again, wanting to see her face. But she wasn't there. As I sat there, I had a sense of absolute dreadness and wondered, what the am I even doing here? I felt a grief that was difficult to define. It reminded me of going to a vacation caravan park with my grandmother and cousins when I was around 12 and there was this enormous center with pool tables and amusements and all that stuff. I remember seeing this lady there every night for a week and falling in love with her straight away, didn't say a single thing to her right away, but built myself up so that I was going to attempt to talk to her on the final night at the disco, but she wasn't there when we got down. I'll never forget the melancholy I felt as we drove home. That girl had walked out of my life, and she probably had no idea she had walked into it. When I didn't see Sarah, I felt the same agonizing grief. I knew nothing about her, had no method of reaching her, and felt a strange grief that was difficult to describe. About 4 months later, I was working on a roof, rebuilding a truss that had been damaged in a storm, when we decided to take a break. As we made our way back to the van, the homeowner came out and asked if we wanted cups of coffee. We agreed, and she brought us coffee and cookies. I remembered her face from someplace as soon as I saw her, but I couldn't place her for the life of me. It wasn't until that night, after racking my brains, that I realized I'd seen her previously in that yoga hall, and it was Sarah's mother. The second day, I returned to complete the work, and the same thing happened. We took a break, walked down towards the van, and the lady came out, asking if we needed some coffee. After we finished, I returned the cups and biscuit wrappers to her and inquired how her daughter was doing and whether she was still experiencing back difficulties. She appeared astonished, but smiled and said sure, before asking how I knew her. When I told her I'd met her at a yoga class months before, she chuckled and said she recalled me now. I then handed her a card with my phone number printed on it and asked if she could get her daughter to text me since I needed to contact her. Shoot my shot, I thought, and now I wish I hadn't. Sarah texted me that night, asking how I was and said she had searched for me again in the yoga hall but I wasn't there. She had gone back the week after I had since she assumed it was bi-weekly. We reconnected shortly after, struck it off again, and after 8 months she moved in with me. She was the most gorgeous person I'd ever met, as well as the most humorous, brilliant, and loving person I'd ever encountered. She had a whimsical beauty about her, pointed ears and defined features. Female reminded me of ACL for something, and I genuinely believed I had found my soulmate. She had moved into my house, and everything was going swimmingly. She was on disability and received personal independence payments, as well as steroid injections for her scoliosis, which, coupled with medications and exercises, kept her discomfort at bay. We would take turns cooking while she cleaned and cared for our cat Mitzi. I was also earning decent money, so we were in a wonderful financial situation. When I came home from work, we'd always do stuff like go on walks or whatever, just to be in each other's company. At this time, I was really considering proposing to her. Around Halloween 2019, things began to alter. Our life was usually pretty busy, but there were times when she wasn't, and that was great with me. We'd work around postures that were comfortable for her due to her back issues, but I'd say she had a strong drive in general. Around October, she began to complain a lot about her back hurting more, particularly just before we'd normally go to bed together. After that, whenever we had, it wasn't passionate or intense, it seemed like we were going through the motions. She began whining when we were in the thick of it, so I had no choice but to quit. I began to feel frustrated, but I was certain that it was simply a phase and that we'd get through it together. The thing is, she seemed to be okay in other elements of her life, even cheerful. The first genuine red sign for me was when she stopped expressing me love altogether in December. She simply became chilly towards me, as if she was offended when I wrapped my arms around her or attempted to take her hand in mine. She was the one with the hands in her hair and the frequent confirming hugs, kisses, and embraces. When we sat on the sofa, she was almost on top of me. That all came to an end for Mitzi, but not for me. Yes, I became envious of our cat. We were in the new year at this time, and I suspected her of cheating. She had been nasty towards me, so I tried to increase my labor around the home, but nothing was good enough. I became a humorless shadow of my witty former self, always being belittled and treading on eggshells, unable to do right for wrong. I got a hold of her phone one night and went through it. Nothing was as clean as a whistle. There were no messages from her friends or her mother, which I found strange. That's when my buddy informed me that if we were on the same plan, I could visit the carrier's website and view all of her phone's activities. We were on the same plan, and I was responsible for her phone. That night, I signed into my BT account, went to mobile, then her number, began sifting through, and there it was, thousands of messages and phone calls to this one number. It had begun 6 months before, and it included dates, hours, and the length of the calls. She'd talk to and text this person for hours while I was at work, erasing everything before I came home, then quitting cold turkey when I got back. I searched the number and found a nearby garage where she had previously had her vehicle repaired. I recall it taking a while to be mended and her grumbling a lot. The entire thing seemed to be a lengthy drawn-out event in more ways than one. I was already certain she was having an affair at this point, so having it verified was more of a relief than anything else. I wanted to catch her in the act rather than have her try to gaslight me and wriggle out of the situation, so I learned all I could about this man. I found out where he lived, that he had a young wife and kid, what vehicle he drove, and even stepped in to inquire about costs so I could see this person in the eyes and get a feel for him. Carl with a K was his name. I knew the affair was physical for a variety of reasons, but the fact that their phone conversations and messages came to a halt between 1 and 2 p.m. every day indicated to me that this was the time they were meeting up. I had all kinds of ridiculous schemes, like borrowing a friend's vehicle and sitting at the end of the block until she drove away. Then following her to where she was meeting this man and jumping out the car like a surprise. But there were too many variables, and I'm no private investigator. When I drove by his garage at 1:30, her vehicle was simply sitting there, and the building was closed up, so the riddle was answered. I was at my wit's end, ready to tell her I knew everything and get the out of my home, when she asked if it would be okay to go away to a spa facility for the weekend. Alone. She claimed she was sad since her back was getting worse, and that this location would be fantastic to assist with that because of all the activities she could do. That she may return invigorated and as if she were a new person. She was correct, since I had no idea who was standing in front of me anymore. Obviously, she wasn't going there by herself, if she was there at all. With this man, it'd be a nasty weekend away. I replied okay, I had a new plan, and this was the last thing I'd ever do for her. If you think this is all a shambles, you're correct, but my view is that I wanted vengeance, and I wanted to get her back in style. I didn't want her to scream at me and gaslight me for days, then leave on her terms, with me as the bad guy. I'd be the bad guy, but on my terms, she'd leave on good terms. When Friday rolled around, She realized the spa was over 100 miles away, so she opted to take the train. I asked her jokingly if she couldn't find anything more local, and she ummed and oh'd until I assured her I was just kidding. I left work a few hours early and drove her to the train station, despite her complaints that she would take a cab, since I wanted to see her go. We get there, and you can guess whose vehicle I see as I hunt for a parking space. That's Carl, with a K. I decide that screw it, I'm going to have some fun and make her squirm, so I park right next to him. They're right next to each other door to door, and she instantly gets anxious because she doesn't know where to look. I'm pretending to seek for anything to drag out the moment, and the atmosphere is razor sharp at that point. What occurred next actually compelled me to deviate from my plan. She began to chuckle quietly. You know when you go to church and someone dies, or when you go to church because someone dies and something humorous comes to mind. And it becomes mental pain trying to think about anything else while attempting to stop oneself from laughing maniacally? She's frantically trying not to laugh, I'm pretending not to see, she's tapping her hand on her pant leg, and out of the corner of my eye, I see him, his head on the steering wheel. She genuinely laughs, but immediately disguises it as a cough and begins cleaning her throat. I start tapping my back and I'm just thinking to myself, I can't wait to have you back. We've all been the brunt of a joke at some point in our lives, whether it's from passive-aggressive coworkers or when you stand up to give a speech at school with a face redder than the devil himself. But you never anticipate such nonsense from individuals who are meant to be on your side, even if you are scheming against them at the time. I helped her carry her belongings into the train station, made sure she was on the right track, said goodbye, and went away. Carl with the K's automobile was nowhere to be seen by the time I got out, so I went back home, calmed myself, and followed out my plan. My strategy was simple but effective. I had a locksmith come out and replace the locks. I then proceeded to bundle all of her clothing and possessions into bin bags and stack them against the side of the home. With the sound of her laughing at me echoing in my ears on Friday night, I did something I never thought I could accomplish. I grabbed Mitzi's litter box, went around the side of the house with it, unzipped the trash bag with Sarah's possessions, dumped everything in, gave the bag a good shake, and tied it up again. At the time, I saw it as a case of cause and effect. She essentially forced me to put cat excrement in with her items. If you think I'm a jerk, you're probably correct. I'll never win an award for being the nicest neighbor on the block. If I don't like you after 5 minutes of meeting you, I probably won't like you for the rest of my life, and the only time I'd take out your garbage is if you were the trash. If you do break through those walls, I believe you will find me to be a devoted and loving person. I did nothing to deserve being cheated on, except maybe throwing cat litter in with her belongings, but that was after the fact. I spent Saturday in a funk, responding to her SMS with whatever enthusiasm I could generate, which wasn't much. I complained of a horrible headache caused by a hangover I didn't have, and the messages stopped. The truth of what was happening sank home, and for the first time since before the new year, I sat in my swivel armchair, Mitzi in tow, like a Bond villain. When Sunday arrived, I was ready to carry out the last half of my plan. To begin, I went to Carl with a K's residence and slipped a letter through his door. It was addressed to his wife and simply said in block letters important Carl with a K's wife's name open immediately. It included a letter describing how her husband was having an affair with my girlfriend, records of her phone conversations and text log, and other facts such as the fact that they were away together this weekend. I went away after putting it through the door and ringing the doorbell. I got in my vehicle and drove for a minute before pulling over and calling Sarah. I honestly don't remember much of what I said to her, but it was something along the lines of, when I asked how everything was going, she began to gush about how much she enjoyed herself, that she feels like a new woman, and that she could see herself doing it 2 or 3 times a year, to blow off the cobwebs. Certainly to blow something. At this moment, I blurt out, "How's Carl?" Her yapping comes to a halt, and quiet fills the air until she eventually asks, "Who's Carl?" I respond, "Carl. With a K." I then continued to inform her that I knew everything, that I'd changed the locks, and that all her belongings were located around the back of the home. Instead of apologizing, she launches into a rant, blaming me for everything and literally stabbing me in the back while claiming that my backbone was blunting her sword. I hung up after telling her that her clothes smelled like Mitzi's excrement. I banned her phone and didn't see her again until Wednesday, when I arrived home from work and she was sitting on the front step, all the bags relocated. I ignored her and went around the back, opening the back door and locking it behind me. I haven't talked to her since, despite her efforts, including a letter. Concerning Carl with a K, I'm not sure what transpired between him and his wife. I do know that he told a buddy of mine that it wasn't personal. That made me upset, as if that was expected to make things better. When someone says something isn't personal, It simply means it isn't personal to them, but it was to me. Is it easier to forgive someone who crashes through your front room in a 4x4 and obliterates everyone you've ever loved if they didn't intend it? Is it simpler to pick up the parts and reassemble them? No. I've heard that COVID hasn't been good to his business, but you won't get me crying over it, unless it's tears of laughter.